All right, welcome back to Firewall. We are recording live from P&T Knitwear here in New York City on Orchard Street. So I was admonished before today's podcast that I wasn't saying that, and I now am. Although we've then debated whether we're actually live or we're just alive while we're recording.
Right, we're live in a certain sense.
In a certain sense. So I'm here with Eric Latch. Eric, for those of you who are New Yorker readers know, is a phenomenal reporter and often covers New York City politics, national stuff too. And he wrote a really seminal article about Mamdani that came out, about 6-8 weeks ago?
Yeah, in October.
Yeah. And, Eric and I talked in general, but read it, and I was just like, you got to come on. So, Eric, thank you for joining us.
Thanks so much for having me.
One fun fact we learned about you this morning is, so Hugo said, you're Canadian, right? And Eric said, no. And then he said, but you're from Oklahoma.
No, I just asked if he lived in Oklahoma.
Lived in Oklahoma.
Yeah.
Okay, born in Canada, but lived in Oklahoma.
I think that's what.
And while neither of those are true, we did learn that there is another person named Eric Latch.
Do you think that's who that is?
Well, he's not. We don't know if he was from Oklahoma. We know that he was at least accused. Was he convicted or just accused?
He was. I don't want to get ahead of myself. So let's just say alleged.
Allegedly murdered many cats in Ohio.
Yeah.
Does Ohio have a cat problem?
I don't know.
It
was just a guy who was haunting my Google results for years, who had gotten himself into an unfortunate situation with one or several cats.
All right. Well, if the cat killer Eric Latch is listening, let us know if you're still around. But we've got the good Eric Latch here. So, Eric, you spent how long working on that article? How long do you typically spend an article? A while, right?
It varies. This one was an assignment that came out of Mamdani's shocking win in the primary.
Right.
So he wins at the end of June, and then sort of I'd covered the mayoral race. I had written a longish piece about the mayoral race, sort of that we didn't even include Mamdani in the art for, which I will forever regret. It was like he was in there, but it was like really about Cuomo and Eric Adams and sort of the state of the city. And then basically from the end of June, from June 24th, I think the piece came out mid-October. It was sort of a sprint to sort of get this done.
What was the point? I mean, you watch this stuff as closely as literally anybody. What was the point in the primary? Well, first of all, when did you first hear of Zohran Mamdani? Let's start with that. Did you know him as an assembly member?
I actually had a mutual acquaintance had put us in touch a couple days after October 7th.
Okay.
This was 2023.
Yeah.
And he and I spoke on the phone. He was sort of, this sort of becomes relevant to the article because he was very concerned about Islamophobic backlash in New York City,
okay,
and sort of how to be, a kind of representative of Muslim New Yorkers at a time that, was just scary and convulsive for everyone. And he was having those conversations with like leaders in the Muslim community across the city, which I think is sort of the reason I say this is because some of those conversations do end up kind of informing how he thought about running for mayor.
Right.
And some of the people he was talking to at that time also end up becoming sort of close advisors to this mayoral.
Okay, so you meet him a few days after, and what was your initial impression of him?
I mean, he was like, I had known his name because he had managed this state senate
Ross's
race.
campaign.
Ross's
our
campaign.
friend Ross Birkin. Yep.
And so it was sort of a name that sort of had bounced around in my head. And, he was like a thoughtful guy, young guy. He was even younger than he is now.
Right.
A couple of years
14.
ago.
Yeah.
And he seemed like very much part of this insurgent left movement, political circle that, had sort of achieved various levels of success in the city in the last couple of years, basically since Bernie's run in 2016. And he just seemed like he seemed like a smart and thoughtful guy, but he seemed like part of that milieu. Like it wasn't like, at that time, people weren't like, those sort of like legendary stories of like Barack Obama, where like from early on, people were like, that guy's going to be the first, black president.
Yeah. Although I will tell you.
Tell me.
Because when I was
in Illinois.
Yeah. So when I was in law school, I went to the University of Chicago, and he was a professor there, and he was absolutely a rock star, but we're talking a rock star personality at the University of Chicago Law School, right? A lot of unbelievably impressive people there, Nobel laureates, all that stuff. But then when he was state senator and I was deputy governor, so he was different, right? He was brilliant. Like, certainly he wasn't the average Springfield hack.
Yes.
But anyone walking around the state capitol in Springfield in 2003 or 2002 who said to you, this guy's going to be president in 6 years, like, no fucking way.
Yes, so, and no doubt, like all this, the mythology gets retconned. But that's what I'm getting at. That was, just like it was like the idea that he was going to be, not just mayor, but like a kind of political, like superstar celebrity. It was like,
Saturday Night Live character.
Exactly. That was far.
So when he announced, though, you noticed, because at least I didn't even know who he was when he announced.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then when did you go from just sort of like, okay, it's another one of 20 people to like start paying attention?
He announced his campaign in October 2024. And he did the now sort of famous video that he did post presidential election with the Trump voters up in the Bronx and in Queens, sort of talking man on the street interviews. That now is sort of told as kind of like the beginning. I think it was a little further on. I still think at that point, he was still, if you're running his campaign staff was tiny. He was polling at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5% in a Democratic primary poll, so it's like nobody in the city knew who he was. And then, like, when did it switch? When did it flip? There was definitely a different energy to his events. And the fact is, thanks to the organizing muscle of his campaign, like they were like a physical presence in the city in a way that none of the other campaigns were. Right. Not even Andrew Cuomo's.
So why do you think they? And let me say one of the reasons why I like your work specifically, but the New Yorker generally, is because you guys try to answer the why, not the what.
Yeah.
Right. In fact, the reason I dislike the New Yorker website is all the short form, like immediate stuff. It's like another progressive whining about what happened that day. Like, I don't give a shit what you think. When it's someone who has spent, like you, 6 months thinking about something and talking to a million people and then saying, here's what I think happened, like that's always to me much more useful. So I have a lot of why questions, but let's start with the why then, because you just sort of led me into it, which is, why did they understand to sort of see the campaign in a physical way that others did not?
Yeah, and I'll just pause and say that I think that the website and the magazine, different functions, different jobs, different things.
I'm sure there are people who like the website, not me. Other than to find the articles.
To each his own, his own. They made a series of they made a series of bets very early, and not just they, but he. It's him and a couple of people, about how they were going to do this campaign. And these bets were made, again, long before they really thought they were going to win necessarily. Right. And those had to do, partially with, like you say, this kind of like the politics of the visible being a contrast to there's sort of more traditional politics that sort of assume the idea that, like, it was sort of perfectly embodied in Andrew Cuomo's campaign. The idea that, like, basically politics happens in rooms that you can't see. Right. That politics is about relationships and about influence and deference and like all these networks and things that are sort of intangible and abstract to the average voter. And the Mamdani campaign did this other thing, which is like politics is about the door knocking, and the palm cards and the social media that is increasingly kind of part of our visible politics. Right. And that contrast was like one of the crucial ones.
If you think about it, right, like, so obviously Obama, Trump, AOC, Bernie, there are certainly, Mamdani had the first person to figure that out.
No doubt.
But he's really the first person in the age of the internet in New York City to figure that out, right? For a local election. Why did it take 20-something years?
This is, actually, I have this question for you, because there was this conventional wisdom for a long time in New York City that, like, basically you couldn't do a citywide field operation, that was sort of futile or impossible, or like this sort of that.
It's hard with two exceptions. So one was mine, which was the Bloomberg World we did because I had unlimited money, right? So you can hire. We had certainly had a citywide field operation, but I paid. Mike paid for it. But so that's one way. But that's, again, we're talking about a very unique thing. Because people, if you're doing it based on volunteering, people have to really be excited by you, believe in you,
Yes.
be inspired by you. And if I gave you the list of mayoral candidates over the past 30 years, there aren't that many that would check that box. I'm really struggling to think of more than Zohar. I mean, Rudy and Mike in their own ways, but not in the sort of super grassroots way that we're thinking of right now. But de Blasio, no. Eric, no. And then you think about that, the conventional, the Chris Quinns, the Scott Stringers, the Bill Thompsons, whoever it is, just the Brad Land, the controller types. Like, no, right? So I just think that you needed someone so then let me ask you the kind of thing going, so in their mindset, they understood that they needed to be able to sort of reach people in a visceral way that would inspire them to want to be engaged, right?
And I think that also it's sort of this blended with, I mean, Zoran, when he set out to run for mayor, he was like, I'm not going to run without the DSA's endorsement. And the DSA in New York City, feel how you want to feel about them, has had some real practice in the last decade.
They're exceptionally good at politics.
At doing the field work of politics.
They should be the model for everybody else.
And they really, that is what they relied on. That sort of that sort of organizing energy and muscle and sort of like institutional memory that has been built up over the last
So right. So it would say right. So if you think about it, over the last 30 years, I started working in New York politics at the Parks Department in 1994. And around that time, you saw the WFP come to life, make the road, then the DSA. And again, there's a lot I don't agree with them on, but in terms of do they work hard and build structures to recruit candidates, train candidates, build grassroots organizations, all that stuff? Absolutely. So was it the combination of that work went in and then the right person to capitalize it emerged?
But there's one more element, which is that, I mean, this is something that I talked with Mamdani's field director during the campaign, Tasha von Aken, who is a veteran DSA field leader who had worked on a bunch of these AOC's race, Julia Salazar's state Senate race in Brooklyn, and worked on a bunch of these DSA campaigns. And it's not just doing the field, it's not just the outreach, it's actually being receptive to what feedback you're getting from doing that work. So what Tasha told me is that, in all of these campaigns over the last several years, when they went out knocking doors, they found that one of the easiest and quickest ways to get voters engaged was to talk about the rent. To talk about how high the rent was a way to get voters talking.
Firewall is recorded at my bookstore, P&T Knitwear, located at 180 Orchard Street on the Lower East Side of Manhattan. We'd love to hear from you with questions, feedbacks, or idea for a guest. Just email me at bradley@firewall.media or find me on LinkedIn. And to keep up with what's on my mind and my latest writing, please follow my new Substack at bradleytuss.substack.com. Thanks again for listening.